Okay, so this talk is about Ramaze or Ramaze, Ramaze. I'm still not sure how to pronounce it. I've heard it said so many different ways, and I might even use different pronunciations as I'm going through my slides. But before I start, I wanted to kind of introduce myself and walk you through the journey that I went through before getting to using Ramaze. So my name is Luke. It's spelled with a C because I was born and raised in Port-au-Prince, in the small island of Haiti in the Caribbean. And the best way to describe Haiti, unfortunately, is just in one word: it's a ghetto. And I love it. It's my country. I love it to death. But it's not a great place to develop yourself. So after graduating from college, the opportunities that I had as far as career goes were more like, I could have started playing cards down the street and try to make a living off of that, or I heard domino playing. You can make a good amount of money doing that. But because I love electronics and I'm entrepreneurial, I probably would have ended up opening my own version of Circuit City down there. But luckily, I had the opportunity to come here. I went to UVA in Charlottesville, Virginia. And a lot of people ask me, how come you went from Haiti to Virginia? It's pretty random. People usually go to New York or Miami. And my answer is that I had the chance to go visit the campus, and I found plenty of good reasons to go to UVA. So afterwards, the ironic part is that I went to get my master's at Georgia Tech in Atlanta, and there were none of the reasons that I went to UVA on the Tech campus down there. But I had a good time, and then I landed a job as a software architect for a big telco. I was doing Java and .NET development. After a while, I really started to get bored with Java. I found out about Rails and Ruby, and I really fell in love with the language. So I started doing Rails, Ruby stuff on the side. And finally, earlier this year, this summer, I quit my job and I started my own company. It's called ShareMe. And we got funding from a seed funding program called Lunchbox Digital. And basically what we do is we let you send messages to your friends that are on all these different networks, because there's so many ways for you now to communicate with your friends: AIM, SMS, email, etc., social networks, Twitter. So if you want to send a message to a lot of your friends, you can come to ShareMe and just send it there, and we'll dispatch it to all your friends wherever they are. So here I am. I'm doing full-time Rails development now. I'm coding in Ruby, which I like. So I was pretty happy with my life. But then Zed Shaw came along and he wrote a blog post and said that Rails is a ghetto. So I realized that I went through all of this to come right back into the ghetto. And so I said, okay, I need some change. I need to find out something else that I can do that I enjoy doing. And I really like Ruby, so I wanted to stay in Ruby. So I started shopping around for web frameworks. And I looked at Merb, Sinatra, Ramaze, and a bunch of other ones. And I really like Ramaze, so I sticked with it. And I started learning it and using it on side projects, etc. But but the main reason I'm here is because I feel like Ramaze is a really good framework, but it's not given enough recognition. Merb is getting a lot of people are talking a lot about Merb and Sinatra, but not as much about Ramaze. So I just wanted to put the word out and kind of, that's my contribution to the project in a way. So that's my motivation. It does not get enough press, and I just want to put the name out there. But one big disclaimer I want to make is that I don't want this to sound like I'm bashing Rails or I'm bashing the ghetto, because I see there's a lot of that in the Ruby community now, and I really like Rails. It got me into Ruby. I really like it, and it's paying my bills, so I don't want to be a part of the bashing Ruby, because even though you can say it's a ghetto, but I kind of agree with Tupac on this one, that I'm not going to give up on the hood, because that's all I got. That's me. So before I start talking about Ramaze, I just want to get an idea of your experience level here. Who here has never heard about it? Okay, who here is a newbie, like you've played around a little bit with it? Any experts in the room? Awesome. So let's just get started. If I could define Ramaze in 3 words, I would use simple, light, and modular. And just to show you the first example, I'm just going to use a Hello World application. To install Ramaze, you can do install the gem using sudo gem install Ramaze, or you can grab it from GitHub. And this is the hello world in Ramaze. So basically, I have a main controller which generates from Ramaze controller, and any action that I have in there, whatever is returned by that action will be sent to the browser. So in that case, hello world is sent to the browser. And you need to have Ramaze start at the bottom. And you can just run that Ruby file, and there you go, you have. So the default port where it starts is 7000. So if you run this, then you'll get your hello world at port 7000. Let's walk through the features of Ramaze real quick. It is an MVC framework, and one of the core principles is that it wants to keep everything very simple. And it does that by being light. You can write a Ramaze application in one file, or if you want, you can build a whole folder structure for it. It's up to you. But it's modular, meaning you don't need to, you bring in the things that you need, and if you ain't gonna need it, then you don't, Ramaze just provides the minimum, and you can bring in the different building blocks that you want to build your application. There's only one dependency, which is rack. So it's nice when you install a game, you don't have like a whole lot other list of games coming with it, only rack. And when it comes to a persistent system, you really get to pick your poison. You can plug in whatever ORM you would like to Ramaze. Same thing goes for templating engines. There's a whole bunch of them that are supported. It ships with one that's called SMR, which is Ramaze spelled backwards, which I'll go over later. It's a fairly stable code base because it was started more than 2 years ago, and it's very well documented. If you have when you're doing Ramaze stuff, all you got to do is you just jump into the code base when you have a question, and usually you'll find the answer there in the comments or in the code itself because it's very well written code. Now, this is a part of Ramaze that I really like. Just to illustrate the beautiful code, this is a little options DSL which they have in there. And they use that to set their global options in the code base. And they developed that DSL that lets you kind of have bullet points for each of your options. And this file looks really good when you look at it, just like you could zoom it out. It's a lot of options, but everything is very clean. And in general, the Ramaze code base is really nice to look at. It's developed in a BDD fashion with Bacon. Bacon is a small RSpec kind of clone. So that makes, because of the fact that it's developed in BDD fashion, I think that contributes to the fact that the code base is very nice. It runs on Ruby 1.9, it runs on JRuby, and also runs on Rubinius. And the community is very, very welcoming. You can easily patch, they accept patches fairly easily, and bugs are usually fixed really fast. If you find a bug, you just jump in the IRC chat room, and usually you'll have your bug fixed within 48 hours. The community is much smaller than Rails or the MERP community. This is by no means a scientific average or whatever. I just jumped in each of the IRC chat rooms to find out how many people were hanging out there. And usually Ramaze has about 40 people in there, 40 to 45, but they're very friendly and very useful when you have questions. So let's jump into how does Ramaze actually work so that we can build a smaller application by the end of the presentation. So when you create a main controller in Ramaze, the convention is that it maps to the root of your application. So if I have a main controller, and my index action would just match the root of the site, and any other action would just go straight to, the action name. So in that case, my hello action, I'll get it from this URL. And other controllers, by convention, are mapped to their name, so that if I have a controller called blue controller, I would get to its index action by just using blue/index, or hello, I would just say blue/hello. It's pretty simple. So that's a convention, but you can configure it by using map. Pretty simple. So my controller is called blue controller, but I want to map it to red, so all I got to say is map red, and then I can use it like this to access it. There's also two little special cases. If you have an action name that you want that has a special character like a dot in it, you can use the define method to get to it. So I say define method styles of CSS, and because I'm in the main controller, I can access this by just going to styles.css. Another special case is if I want to have an underscore in my URL, then my action name should use 2 underscores. So this is actually 2 underscores, my __ action. These are just special cases, but. And the way the actions accept arguments is it's kind of nice because rather than having a big params hash, you actually have an argument in the method signature, like first and second, and these will be taken from the URL. So in that case, my add action will get first, it's going to be 1, and second is going to be 2. So you can explicitly say these are the actions that these are the arguments that my action would accept. But you still can use other regular parameters, and when you do that, they will be, you can grab them from the request hash, like this. In Ramaze, anytime you have an error in one of your controller actions, it will be redirected to the error action of that controller. So, and they provide a default error action for you, so you don't have to have it there. But if you want to modify it, all you got to do is create your own error action or template, and that will be served whenever there's an error. There's 3 ways you can do routing in Ramaze. The first way is to use string routers, and this is fairly simple. You create a Ramaze route where you say, okay, if it comes to foo, just send them to bar. Very simple. The second way is to have regex routers. In this case, you have a regex which you are redirecting to whatever you want on the right side. So in that case, I'm saying that every time I have a URL that has a bunch of digits followed by .txt, just send that to the text controller and pass the digits. So an example would be 123.txt, that would point out to text 123. And the third way to have routing is to use lambda routers. These are very flexible. Basically, you pass in a lambda function to the route and you give it a name, and that will take the path and the request that coming in, and you can do pretty much whatever you want and return a string at the end, which is where Ramaze will actually route the action for you. So in this example, I'm saying that if I have /foo in my URL and there's no parameters passed, it's just going to go to foo. But if I do have the bar parameter passed, then I'll take it to the bar action. So that's just one example. You can do a lot of things with this kind of route. Testing, like I said, is done in Bacon. This is just an example to show you. This is testing my Hello World application. So you just got to say behaves like HTTP and put Ramaze there, and then you can do things like that. Very, very simple and clean looking. So let's move on to views. Like I said, you can use pretty much whatever templating engine exists in the Ruby world. The bundle is Ezamor, and it comes by default. So if you're using Ezamor, you don't need to bring any other libraries. It's in there. That's the nice part about it. But you have plenty of other choices. If you're like me, do a lot of Rails work, so you're kind of used to ERB, then you can use eRuby or ERB. But these templates, they can be internal or external. External meaning you can have an external file like view.xhtml that you save somewhere. And by default, if your action is called view, then it will grab that view XHTML file. But they can also be inline inside of your action code. So just like I was returning hello world earlier, you can have your whole template there as a big string, and that would get run through the templating engine before. So the logic is like this. When you get there, if there's an external template, then you just grab that external template and run it through the templating engine and send it to the browser. If there's no template, then you'll take whatever string is returned from that action call, and you run that through the templating engine and send it to the browser. And just like in Rails, if you set instance variables in your action method, you can access them in your templates. The convention, if you're using external templates, is to have them in a folder called view. But you can set that, you can change that by just using view root in your controller and point it to my templates folder where you want to save your templates. You can also have layout, just like in Rails. And the easy way to do that is just to define an action that is your layout, or have a template that is your layout, and just make that call saying that my layout is layout. So in that case, the blue layout here is the name of my action. So if that was my layout, then I would just say layout, my layout. And this is an example of an inline template. Rather than create an external file, I just have my layout in there. It's nice when you want to have an app in just one file. You don't have to create external templates. Of course, if you want to have your layout applied to only some of the actions, you can use deny layout to say, okay, don't apply it to these actions, or you can say layout only for, an array of actions. And SMR is very similar to eRuby. It's a re-implementation of the templating engine that was in Nitro. And basically, if you want just code that will just execute but not be put on your HTML, then you just use this notation. If you want it to actually be spit out on your HTML, then you'll use this, which is exactly like you would do a string in Ruby, right? But SMR has a nice little component to it. You can build SMR elements, and these are basically like partials. So I can create an element called sidebar, right? And that's going to basically generate a HTML element for me. All I have to have is a render action. And in that render action, I just spit out whatever I want to spit out by that element. And then I can use that inside my other template, just like this, right? Which is pretty neat. And in this example, I don't have any inner HTML for a sidebar. But if I had inner HTML, I could actually put it in between and close the sidebar tag. And within my render action, I can just spit content, the content variable, and everything that was in the inner HTML would go into content. And if I want to pass attributes to the sidebar also, I could just pass them there. So I could say class equal my class, and then I can access that from inside the render function by using @class. So now I'm going to go into models, but before I do that, I just wanted to, I don't get the opportunity to be in front of my camera all the time, so I just want to send a shout out to my sisters and my good friends. I guess that's a ghetto in me. I couldn't help it. So let's move to models. Really, a web framework shouldn't have to really deal with models in a way. So that's up to you to figure out. You can use whatever persistent layer you want. These tend to be the most popular ones. The Ramaze community tends to use SQL or data mapper more often. So if you use these, it's nice because as you're looking at example code, they usually are written in one of these two, with one of these two. But the one thing that it does provide is a little storage facility that's Ramaze store. It's essentially a wrapper for YAML store. So it's really easy to use. All you got to do is, create a Ramaze store default object, and you pass it the name of the file. So in that case, coder.yaml, where you want to store the data, and then you can just start putting stuff into that, like I'm doing here, and it will just write them into the YAML file. Ramaze also ships with a set of helpers, and these fall into 3 categories. One are the default helpers. The default helpers are included automatically for you in your controllers. There's only 5 of them. So you can start using them in your controllers without having to, require them or do anything. And then there's a whole list of optional helpers. There's at least more than 20 of them in the code base. And these, if you want to use, you actually, in your controller, you have to say helper and the name of the helper to kind of bring it in. And then you can define the custom helpers. Once you do that, then you'll bring them in similarly, the same way that you would bring in the optional helpers. One helper that you will have to use probably is the link helper. That's one of the default helpers. It just provides a nice utilities to access, to create URLs and stuff. So here, if I want to redirect to, say, admin index, I can just say redirect to our admin controller index. There's a shortcut, which is RS. RS means redirect to this action in my current controller. So if I'm in the admin controller and I say RS index, it will redirect. That's a path for admin index. So similarly, I can just say RS, the root of the site. The other helper function is A, which just creates an anchor tag for you. So you can do A text, and that will just send you the text. Or you can say A home, which is what I want to print out, and then pass in the href using the other helper. So the other helper that that's very useful, this one is optional, so you actually have to say helper aspect to start using it. But it basically lets you wrap around different actions on your controller method. So I can say, let's say I have a controller that has these 4 actions. I can say, okay, after each of these actions, redirect to RS. So that's just a way I could refactor my code rather than have the redirect in every single action. a few extra things that I want to show you. There's a tool, they call it Ramaze tool, that lets you, just like in Rails, create a whole folder structure for you to get started. You do that by just saying Ramaze create my app name. And by default, Ramaze uses jQuery, so it would bring in jQuery into your project, and it will provide, you know, basic error index and basic pages for you to get started. To deploy it, it's based on rack, so pretty much anything that has a rack adapter, you can use. I like to use 10, and that's very simple. If I write a one single file Ramaze application, I just run this line to get it started, and you can start as many servers as you want by changing the servers here. Other two neat things that I just wanted to point out. The options DSL, which I showed earlier, is pretty neat. And I've actually extracted it once just to use it in another project because I really like the syntax of it. And if you have the Ramaze code base, it's, you can find it there. The other thing is there's an implementation of Ruby fibers for 1.8 in the Ramaze code base, which is pretty neat. So if you want to play around with fibers and you're running Ruby 1.8, then you can grab it. If you have the Ramaze game, it's right there for you to use. All you got to do is require it. You can also find it at this address if you want to use it in a different project. So now I'm just going to go ahead and do a little bit of live coding. I'm going to do something simple, the blog application, because I think it's a good example, even though we're probably all tired of saying it, but it's a fairly simple thing that everybody understands the business logic behind it. It's going to be kind of semi-live coding because I have a bunch of snippets so that I don't make typos as I'm doing this. So first thing is requiring everything that's necessary. And then I'm going to use the Ramaze store because that's easy. I don't want to bring any ORM. And I'm just going to create a little struct for my post, which has a created at body and title, which I'll use throughout my code. So this is kind of the framework. I'm just creating a main controller. I have my index action. In my index action, I'll create an array of posts, and then I'll grab everything from the DB, which is from my YAML file, and for each of them, I'll just dump them into my array. And then finally, I'm going to use inline templates because I want to run this in one file. So here, I just basically use Esamar to go over all my posts, and for each of them, post the title, the created at, and the body. So once I have that, I should be able to actually run this and start saying post. But my YAML file is empty for now, so I'm going to create an action to start adding stuff to my YAML file. So this is a new action. It's essentially just HTML. It's just a form. So nothing to see here really. Finally, the create action. So my form is going to post to create, and what I'm doing here is I'm creating my little struct, and my little post. I'm getting the request from post title and post body. I could have done this the other way. I could have done post, or title body, but I just decided to just go ahead and use regular parameters, just like you would do in Rails. And then I just put them into my YAML file right there, right? And I redirect to the root of the site. Okay. This is a simple layout for my application, again using inline templating. Notice I have the add content there, so everything that my action returned will be spit into that part of the code. And I also created a little style sheet for it, which I'm including here. And this is the important call. This is telling my controller that all my actions should use this layout. And finally, my actual CSS. Rather than have an external file, I'm just using the define method that I showed you earlier to create that. I'm just spitting out the HTML. One thing that's important is that I don't want my CSS to be wrapped around by the layout, so I have to say, deny the layout, and so that doesn't happen. So that's it. That was fairly quick. I was able to create a little blog application. I'm going to go ahead and run it now. So it's here, it's blog.rb. So it's starting, port 7000, and there you go, I have my blog. I'm gonna post a few blog posts. So they're all just going into my YAML file, and I have a basic blog engine. I'm not going to go ahead and do comments because I think you kind of got the idea of how quickly you can get running with Ramaze. But let me show you my db.yaml file was in there earlier, got created for me, and you can see my 2 posts are in there. So a few sites that are powered by Ramaze. There's not a lot out there in production. So the biggest one is probably the first one. It's kind of a book tracking site. And the other ones are fairly small. The Rumors is probably the one that gets the most traffic. It's a Facebook app. But if you want to learn more, you can go to the website. There's a lot of information on the website. The IRC channel is very useful. There's always people hanging out there willing to help. This is my blog. I promise I'm going to post more about Ramaze in the future. So if you get my RSS feed, you'll see these posts. And finally, GitHub.com. Actually, should be Manveru Ramaze. I showed it earlier. But really, just read the code because it's really well written. It's really easy to figure it out. That's all I had. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Have you been done any benchmarks
The question was, have I looked at any benchmarks? Is that right? On the site, they have some benchmarks. If you go on ramaze.net, they have some benchmarks. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I think they were benchmarking, basic Hello World applications, so take that with a grain of salt. But I think the performance was even better than MERB from what I can remember. But I'll have to double check that.
Yeah, the second question, can you package it all up as a single directory so everything is right there that you can run it?
Could you repeat that, please?
Can it be packaged where everything that it needs to run, all the gems and all the options are in a single directory? Does that move that around?
Yeah, so if you create it with the tool, the question was, can you package it into one directory so that you can deploy it? If you create it with the tool, it will give you a good structure to get started from if you want to do that. So it would create the whole folder directory. I think there might be a vendor folder where you can put in external libraries.
They'll put the Ramaze code in that directory?
Yeah. Like freeze other games? There's not really a facility to do that yet in it. So you'll have to handle that yourself somehow. Other questions? Cool.
You mentioned that you have your own startup company. Are you using Ramaze for the code based on that?
Okay, so the question was that I have my own startup. Am I using Ramaze for that? And I'm not using it in any customer-facing part of my site, but I do have one little web service that we use in the back end that's built on Ramaze. It works on the question is, does it work on JRuby? And yes, it does work on JRuby and Rubinis. More questions? Thanks for listening.